So for today's project, I'm going to show you how you can use a laser cutter to make some fairly intricate and complex designs and kind of cut them out of latex. And specifically, I'm gonna make this pair of panties that I've designed, and I'm gonna show you all the steps of how to make this happen. What I'm using for this project is a cheap Chinese laser cutter called the K40. It runs for around $350/350 euros. It is not really a consumer-friendly apparatus since it takes a fair bit of fiddling around to get it running. But at the same time, it is dirt cheap compared to something like the Maker Forge, which is like the next cheapest consumer laser cutter, which runs for around $3,000 to $6,000, which is way out of my budget. So yeah, if you are doing something as simple as cutting a logo or some simple shapes, you could probably go ahead, just cut it, clean it with some turpentine and then glue it, and maybe get away with it without making too much of a mess. But as you might find, very fine detailed latex forms can just become very messy. They don't really hold the shape and it's very hard to work with them. For this project, however, we are doing some pretty complex, thin and fragile designs, which takes quite a bit of more effort. But after some testing and prototyping, I've come up with a method that works pretty well. Although it requires a bit of work, which is not exactly scalable for mass production, but excellent for some super unique designs, seeing as I've never actually seen something like this worn or sold anywhere before. So let's get on to it. So to start off, I set a piece of paper on the bed with magnets to keep it in place, and then I cut out the outline of my design. I then use that cut-out piece to measure some latex, since the machine is very small and just takes small pieces at a time. I make sure to leave some buffer space since placement is not always 100% accurate. And then I add a layer of painter's tape on the latex. Do not remove the talcum powder beforehand, or the tape will be too hard to remove later on. And adding this layer will basically help the latex to keep its intended shape. Without it, I found it quite impossible to really pull this kind of a thing off. It just becomes way too messy. Then we place the latex on the laser bed, set in the right settings, which really depend on the color of the latex, your laser itself. So just test it and play around until you find the right settings. If you have a laser, you probably know how to do that. For me, for a 0.4mm black latex, I usually run with 30 millimeters per second with around 30 milliamps, and for this turquoise of 0.8 millimeters, I run with around 50 millimeters per second and around 10 milliamps. This is together with the painter's tape layer. Without it, it's probably half the power. Then just run the laser, cut it out, keep an eye on the laser, make sure it is nice and smooth and no problems come up. After that, we can use turpentine to clean the laser cutter residue on the backside. The residue is some really nasty and sticky stuff. A household spirit will not really be enough. So go with turpentine, or if you don't have that at hand, acetone will work up to a point, but turpentine is the best. Then we need to make a little bit of a helper tool. You can use a piece of plexiglass, plywood, or MDF, as I'm using in here, to basically cut out the same type of a shape. Once we have that cut, we use some spray glue on that tool, and then also some spray glue on the painter's tape side of the latex. Then carefully align the two and just glue them together. This is where the painter's tape really comes into play. It helps to keep the latex in shape without flapping around all over the place, and basically this would be quite impossible if you hadn't done that beforehand. So the reasons for this template tool thingy is one, to help keep the latex from curling up when we apply the glue. Two, it will also keep the exact shape and dimensions it should have. Otherwise, things get distorted really easily and it just becomes a big ass mess. And three, we want to be really fast applying the adhesive, meaning that things will get really sloppy. The holes in the template will basically allow the excess glue to drip away without making a mess, which would otherwise stick and ruin the opposite side of the latex, which we are later on placing on top and gluing it onto this piece. And trust me, I found all of this project one by one by going through all the mistakes and then trying to figure out how I can solve them. So this is probably the best way that I can think of. And on we go! We slobber a lot of glue on it. I tried to add a fairly thick layer since we're able to apply it only on one side. Well, for obvious reasons. I do it really fast so I can be all done in one go. And once the glue is on, I try to clean it up a little bit in the holes and making sure there's no huge clumps around which would spread onto the other side. After giving it a couple of minutes to cure, we slide the opposite side onto the pattern. I've tried both, kind of going slowly and rolling it onto it with a roller tool, and at the same time as well just kind of taking the whole piece and plopping it onto the latex. Both ways work quite well, although I think the rolling one is a little bit more reliable in terms of avoiding air bubbles and so on. Then of course you just roll over the design, make sure that everything's nice and shut. Then it is good to just peel off the tool before the glue has a chance to dry, so just be slow and careful in here so you don't rip the latex up. At the same time, it's also good to remove the painter's tape now, because the glue is still kind of a little bit sticky, so if you do happen to pull the latex loose, it will still have something to kind of glue onto. And that is about it. You can just finish up the piece, glue up all the other sides, and you're basically done. One thing to note is that this will only work if the details aren't crazy fine. I found that anything less than 2 millimeters tends to come off along with the painter's tape. So you can go pretty fine, but within reason. Well, there you have it. That's one hell of a unique pair of panties that I've never seen anything like sold or worn anywhere before. Probably because it's way too complicated for mass production, but very nice for your own use, although I guess I won't really be using these. But well, I have some friends who might. Speaking of which, many thanks to Josephine who kindly agreed to model these for the video.